Hello, I'm Lady 12 Gauge, doing an introduction to this episode because I have killed Phineas and taken his microphone. Welcome to the Apostates Playground. Today, Phineas and C are wrapping up part 1 of their discussion of the overturning of Roe v. Wade. This episode starts with what passes for constitutional analysis and a history lesson in the field of whatever timeline Sam Alito thinks he's in.
The constitutional analysis bit, because mostly it's been jerking off so far, he takes issue with the fact that the right to privacy in Roe had been found to spring from no fewer than 5 different constitutional provisions: the 1st, 4th, 5th, 9th, and 14th. He doesn't explain why this is an issue. He just seems at this point to take umbrage with the fact that when you combine things, you get new things. Conservatives love to talk about syllogisms, which is where you take 2 premises and put them together and you get a new thing. And the thing is like, that's how that worked. They looked at the 1st, 4th, 5th, 9th, and 14th Amendment and said, hey guys, there's a common theme here. And that common theme is a right to privacy. You have the right to worship. You have the right to speak. You have the right to not be forced to quarter soldiers in your home, and the right not to be, searched without for unreasonable reasons, and the right to not incriminate yourself, and the right to liberty. And like they said, the running thread in this is you have the right to be left alone to make your own decisions, which is the basis of a lot of decisions that are now under threat.
Yep.
He also says that the fact that only one sex can get an abortion does not trigger a heightened scrutiny unless, quoting Geduldig v. Aiello, which was decided a year after Roe in 1974, and so it probably didn't get a lot of consideration as a precedent in 1973. Quote, is a, quote, end quote, pretext designed to affect an invidious discrimination against members of one sex or the other, end quote, end quote. And they say that the goal of preventing abortion doesn't do that.
Sorry, what?
Yeah, no, making it so that because the abortions aren't a thing doesn't affect people with uteruses more than not having them. It doesn't discriminate against one sex or the other because only one sex can do it. So you're not discriminating against people without uteruses by saying that people with them can't get an abortion, because you're not also saying people without them can't get them. He's basically saying that if one group doesn't meet a necessary condition, it doesn't count as discrimination.
My head hurts.
Yeah, that's fair. No, it's, and like that's what he's saying is, it feels like, okay, so there's a lot of things here that so part of what a Supreme Court opinion does is it signals what kind of positions those justices have for what kind of cases to bring. This feels like if you discriminate against Black people based on melanin, it's not discrimination because you can't discriminate against white people based on melanin.
Putting it in those terms helped a little bit because that's what I thought it was kind of suggesting. And I was like, what? But then I just got kind of lost because I was like, okay, but like it does still affect the other people who don't have a uterus, because there's a portion of them who can cause the person with the uterus to get pregnant because they have the other part of the equation. So what? I don't know.
Yeah, he's basically saying that because the uterus is a necessary condition to be able to have an abortion, it's not discrimination if they can't get an abortion. He's saying that because only one sex can get an abortion, his words, it's not discrimination to say whether or not they can, basically implying that if people without uteruses could get an abortion, also they would not be able to get an abortion, so it's not discrimination. Which
if the people like him could get one, it wouldn't be an issue. It would have been like they would have been on it.
Oh yeah, 100%. Like, yeah, no, every mistress that a senator, justice, or whomever
Yeah,
has is still
yeah,
going to get an abortion.
yeah. They're just gonna move them, shuttle them somewhere else, or have it shuttled someone shuttled to them. Whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. And then moving on to the 14th Amendment, we get a history lesson nobody asked for coming up.
Per usual.
He opens by saying that previously the court had held with both precedent and with what the state constitutions protected at the time the amendment was ratified, pointing out that Ginsburg traced the right to be protected against excessive fines dated back to the Magna Carta, Blackstone's commentary, and 35 of 37 constitutions. And in McDonald, a gun case, 22 or 37 states protected the right to keep and bear arms in the constitutions, affected how those things were seen by the court. Basically saying that he's setting up the idea that, like, because when it was ratified, this was the situation with the states, this is what we had to rule. And he's setting that up for some bullshit.
It sounds like some bullshit.
Yeah. He then appeals to an essay that found more than 200 different uses of the word liberty, which doesn't fucking mean anything. And he has the audacity to talk about respecting history, which, for the record, has shown that libertarianism doesn't work ever. This kind of thing, history has shown that it is fascism, actual fascism, and doesn't work. I mean, when they scream about like socialism in Venezuela, you can go, okay, but like Finland is fine. Venezuela has other issues. There's no point where you can point to this kind of decision and say, and also things were fine. And actually, that's not true. Libertarianism did work out great for the mine owners who got to just kill their employees and restock them whenever they got bitchy. And also a group of bears in New Hampshire who, like, within our lifetimes got to eat a bunch of libertarians who didn't want to pay for central garbage collecting because that would be a tax. And so the bears moved in.
Oh, wow.
And so then people started to hunt their bears on their property, but they did it like an episode of Looney Tunes, where like they would put a gun connected to a tripwire. So when you walked in front of the gun, it would shoot the bear. And then a bunch of people shot themselves with their Looney Tunes bullshit. Like,
not surprised.
And this is the same mentality that doesn't work and is feeding into things that have also don't work, that do things like restrict abortion. When it comes to defining liberty as it is in the 14th Amendment, the extent of what he does here is say that he just says the clear answer is that the 14th Amendment does not protect the right to an abortion.
Can you backtrack for just a bit? And what is the 14th Amendment again? I get the numbers mixed up. Mm-hmm. It just feels like a good idea to, like, for people who don't want to pause the episode and like Google it and then come back. Or me, I'll just say it's for me.
No, it's good. I mean, like, if you need the refresher on the 14th Amendment, there's a really good chance other people do. And I'm happy to read this to everybody because you don't get to copyright the Constitution. So it's fair. It's a public domain. All persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of all laws. Representatives, Section 2, representatives shall be apportioned among the several states according to their respective numbers, counting the whole number of each of persons in each state, so on and so forth.
I don't see how that ties in.
It doesn't. Section 3, no person shall be a senator or representative in Congress or elector of the president or vice president or hold any office, civil or military, under the United States or under any state who, having previously taken an oath as a member of Congress or as an officer at the United, blah, blah, blah. Section 4, the validity of the public debt of the United States authorized by law, including debts incurred for payment of pensions and bounties for services in suppressing insurrection or rebellion, shall not be questioned. but neither the United States nor any state shall assume or pay any debt or obligation incurred in aid of insurrection or rebellion against the United States, or any claim for the loss or emancipation of any slave, but all such debts, obligations, and claims shall be held illegal and void. Section 5, the Congress shall have power to enforce by appropriate legislation the provisions of this article. I skipped over a lot of that because it's only section 1 that really matters here. And the rest of it deals with like how representatives are calculated and who's responsible for debt as it relates to January 6th, not the states. So yeah, basically it doesn't say abortion in there. It says that you don't lose life, liberty, or property without due process. Basically, Alito says, like, fuck you, you're not going to read this anyway, I do what I want. He then goes on to talk about common law. Did you want to take a guess about common law when?
What?
Do you want to take a guess as to, like, the century he's talking about common law from?
Common law. Not the one he lives in, I'm imagining.
Not the one he lives in.
Yeah, figures.
In the 13th century.
Oh, God. that's much further away. That's not even a difference of like difference of 1 century. That's like that's too many centuries. If that were like an undying, like immortal creature, it would be
been so much longer. It's been so long since I got to tell you it gets worse. It gets worse. The day before, in Bruin v. New York, which overturned gun laws, he wrote basically saying that if the law, the reference is from too far before when the Constitution was written, be real. Don't reference it. And then in this opinion says in the 13th century, Henry de Brechton said that if you cause an abortion by trying to kill a woman, if the fetus is moving, you've committed a homicide, which I would agree with because removing that choice should be a crime. And he says this because abortion was a crime after quickening, which is when the fetus first moves, which usually occurs between 16 and 18 weeks. Definitely, after 15 weeks, which is what Jackson's women incubator manufacturing clinic was asking for. Like, that's what Mississippi was asking for was, can we? So it's kind of weird, especially because in the footnote he says that that's not accepted and there's some debate around it. And I don't know if that's true. I don't care. I just bring it up because it really feels like he's kicking himself in the dick. Like, we're overturning Roe because in the 13th century, this may or may not have been a thing.
Yeah. Just grasping at straws.
Yeah. And the eminent common law authorities, Blackstone, Coke, Hale, and the like, all describe abortion after quickening as criminal.
I can't hear quickening and not think of like Highlander shit.
But quickening is a modern medical term. It still means when the baby moves, but culturally it's a lot more relevant because of Highlander.
Yeah. I mean, that's where I first heard it. So,
So then we go back to the 13th century to say that there are treatises corroborating the statements that abortion is a crime. And it might partly be a quote, but we're talking about the 1300s and how we should take advice from them on how to legislate in the now. Like,
half the stuff we do now, they probably would consider like witchcraft or heresy, I imagine.
You know how to do math. Be the end of it.
That's right. I can read.
In 1732, you can read like Middle English. Like, you can read Old English. I've seen you do it. It's very impressive. I'm super impressed because I can't make heads or dick out of that.
Context.
Like, they would
honestly
slaughter you.
Yeah, there.
They'd be so mad. They would call you a Moor.
Half of them call me a Moor. The other half would just be like trying to like get me in the back alley or something.
While
'Cause
calling you a
some
more.
kind of weird ass, like, obsession with, like, fetishism and stuff, like
Yeah. Yeah, it'd be a weird time for you.
yeah, it would. It
It'd be
would.
boring for me. They'd just be like, he's
Um,
tall. He's 6'3" and has a beard. Make him a king or something. In 1732, which is only 40 years before the country, Eleanor Beare was convicted of, quote, destroying the foetus in the womb and, quote, thereby causing her to miscarry, end quote. Bieri was sentenced to 2 days in the pillory and 3 years imprisonment. Again, she removed the choice from another woman. It's just saying that if you force a woman to not be pregnant, it was a crime.
yeah,
And it
basically
should be.
the idea of, enforcing your own personal will on somebody else, you know?
Yeah.
All that basic stuff.
I wouldn't turn any of this in an undergrad philosophy class. Like, I would be ashamed to turn this in, especially Kavanaugh's concurrence, which next episode's going to be concurrences and dissent. I
wouldn't turn this shit in a regular ass English class that I take. And that's not
Yeah,
even philosophy. That's just English. That's just
it's philosophy. It's just
okay.
philosophy
Well,
without algebra.
that's
English,
too much math. That's too much black magic. I'd be considered a witch. Too
yeah.
much power.
He tries to make a case that even though a pre-quickening abortion was not considered homicide, it doesn't follow that it's permissible or a right, because the judge didn't even say quickening in that case, and it was 1602, where they didn't know that Samuel Alito would want them to phrase things a certain way in 2022, so they didn't specify whether or how criminal it was
They should have
400
known.
years
They
ago.
really fucked up.
They did. They should have known better. He tries drawing an inference saying that if you try to kill person A and kill person B, like adult separate people, according to Hale and Blackstone, it's still murder.
Yeah.
Yeah. But if a pre-spasmodic fetus wasn't considered a person, then there's a whole ass thing missing from his inferences. Like, again, his logic relies on an unstated premise. Unstated, like, explicitly, assuming that we're talking about killing a person instead of
Well, he did
flushing a
say
uterus.
unborn
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 human being.
human being or some shit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's what I mean. At no point has he said a fetus is a person. Release all of the pregnant women from jail and put those fetuses on trial. Because you can't hold a fetus in jail without due process if it's a person. So all the pregnant ladies have to get kicked out until we try their fetuses for accessories.
The luck did not to work out.
How do you plead? So yeah, like, he didn't. He stated it as the defendant's claim, not his claim, because he's a coward.
Mm-mm-mm.
Then we jump forward between 8 and 300 years, almost to 1910, when
Oh, we're closer to our yeah.
we're closer to women having the right to vote, except the black ones. Sorry, we're closer to not you having the right to vote.
Yeah.
But more targeted. Almost all of the states outlawed abortion. So how could it be a right now? Weirdly, until 1839, women couldn't own property. And in 1840, they could only do so in Mississippi, meaning not in the other however many states. It doesn't say in the didn't say in the Constitution at the time that they should be allowed to, and used very gendered language that we could draw inferences of. So sure, it says equal protection, but they didn't have a constitutionally protected right. And if we just say, if I go to my Constitution and I flip to, that's 1960s, that's too far. 1940, 1933, 1932. The right of citizens in the United States to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of sex. Congress shall have power to enforce this article. For 1 year of ratification of this article, the manufacture, sale, or transportation of intoxicating liquors, the importation thereof, Congress in the several states shall have the concurrent power to enforce not prohibition. That one is prohibition. Yeah, I'm not seeing anything about how women have to be allowed to have property in here. Weird.
No, we were
So
afterthoughts.
I guess women don't get property.
Yeah, I guess not. What else is new?
Well, fuck us, am I right? Because that's the logic they're using. If it doesn't say it in the Constitution. Actually, I'm not actually sure when it says.
Phineas needs a moment to check his Constitution.
I don't believe. I just did a couple quick scans, but I don't think it says that it ever says specifically that women can own property in the United States. So bad news. Actually, I think it was until the 1950s or 1960s that a woman needed a letter of recommendation from a man in order to be able to buy property.
Capitalism, inflation is so bad now. I barely own property, so I'm not that far off.
And
I
that's
guess.
fair. I mean, if we ever get there, then all any of our women listeners have to do is shoot me an email.
Oh yeah, you can copy paste.
I'll just copy paste, but only for listeners. The last thing that we're going to cover here today is going to be amicus briefs and the little bit after amicus briefs. Alito says nuh-uh to the amicus briefs. Now, amicus briefs are friend of the court briefs. They're people who have expertise or think they have expertise or are insane writing in to say, hey, this is a thing the court should be aware of. So if I were going to do that, I would say something to the effect of Clarence Thomas shouldn't be allowed to write concurrences because he promises a dystopia. Tune in next week. Next episode. I'm not reliable enough to say next week. There'll be another one eventually. Fuck.
Don't hold yourself to it.
Soft deadlines. So yeah, like none of the amicus brief responses are compelling. He just lines them up and says, fuck you. And after that, he talks about the fact that there are a shit ton of rulings demonstrating that people have a general right to autonomy, not being forced to undergo surgeries, contraception, interracial marriage, generally a lot of small government get out of my business decisions that you get out of a Democrat court, a post civil rights Democrat court, the liberals. And this is a different episode. This isn't the episode 4 here, but he hits something I feel very strongly about. He says that because of those decisions, quote, these attempts to justify abortion through appeals to a broad right to autonomy and to define one's concept of existence prove too much. Because, and I Phineas am being serious right now, those criteria at a high level of generality could license fundamental rights to illicit drug use, prostitution, and the right. Fucking yeah, dude, let's party. Like, yeah, okay, let's let people fucking get high with shit that, like, it's not cut with anything weird. Fine. That's fine, right?
If they let it happen, sex workers, for example, that demand is obviously not going away if political scandals are any indication. Just make it safe for them and make it normal so that you can stop getting caught in the act and pretending to be sorry about it.
Yeah, and I'm not even saying let's decriminalize sex. I'm saying let's decriminalize not all the drugs, bunch of drugs, probably. I'll meet you part way. I have a thing about meth. But let's regulate it. It's fine. Can't do heroin with your babies. That's a much better law.
Yeah.
and I'm not pro decriminalizing sex work. I'm pro legalizing sex work. I am pro brothels that are inspected with like laws about how you have to treat the workers. I am talking about regular government funded testing. I am talking about like the whole thing. Let's keep our sex workers safe.
Get OSHA involved so they can
Yeah,
keep
that's what I'm
things
saying.
careful and
Yeah, like let's like it should be its own kind of crime. You should get hit for both a business contract violation and assault if you hurt a sex worker. The contract is for XYZ. If you go outside of XYZ, you don't just get sexual assault, you get sexual assault and fucking RICO. Like, let's fucking go. Because all they do is they just make it a more and more dangerous world for sex workers to participate in, but then they do shit like this that makes it more and more likely that people are going to have to turn to sex work in order just to live and function. You can't have it both ways. So let's protect our sex workers from the government, from dangerous customers. And you know what, as a society, well, I'm here because fuck this, I'm on this soapbox now. As a society, we quit shaming people for using sex workers. You can't support sex workers and not support them getting business. It doesn't make you cool to be like, yeah, I support sex workers, but fuck that guy for getting an escort. No, you don't get to do that because that is not supporting sex workers. That's being a liar and a bad ally to sex workers. If you're like, hey, fuck that guy because he went to he got his stripper, but I support her for being able to do what she wants. No, you don't, because if you did, you'd fucking advertise for her so she can get some fucking money because a bitch gotta eat.
yeah. I mean, I don't have anything to add to that. It's true. It's hypocrisy. It's hypocritical.
It is. And I feel like the majority of sex workers are women, which is why I focus on women. But like when I say sex workers, all of them, all of the like, not like, no, all sex workers. Like,
yeah,
I just got on one and said women because I wasn't thinking about my words. I was just having emotions into a microphone. And you know what? Also, speaking of 1910, he tries to say that shit like prostitution isn't deeply rooted in our history because that's what he keeps appealing to. But 1910, that same time that he referred to, is when prostitution became federally illegal. It was federally legal to be a sex worker until 1910, which seems a lot more deeply rooted in our fucking history than 13th century Anglo-Saxony. Unless you only see the country as white, which he does because he's a fucking asshole.
Yeah, I was like, well, I mean, obviously.
Also, if we want to appeal to things that are deeply rooted in our history, how about we recognize the fact that the country was built on the backs of slaves, the Chinese, and prostitutes, and we actually do something with that shit. I want restitution for the descendants of Chinese immigrants who were killed working on the railroads. I want restitution for every black person. There's this weird thing of like, well, no, only black people who can show that they were descended from slaves.
You can't show shit.
They didn't keep a lot of birthing records, motherfucker. If they did, it was like a horse pedigree, you son of a bitch. No, all black people, because you know what? All black people suffer because of the chain of events that come from slavery. It's not a descendant only issue when all black people are made to suffer for it. So fucking for black people. And then, you know what? Lost wages for sex workers. Restitution for everybody. Fuck it.
Yeah. I can't add anything to it because you said everything.
Whew. Sorry, I'm having some feelings about
Clearly.
some stuff. This is what it's like to live with me. So like something I get off, something sets me off and I'm just gone. Yeah.
Big differences between you and I where I guess you project it out. I just internalize it.
Yeah, I have Kyle Rittenhouse was a hero Trump 2024 neighbors who are hearing me scream all this because my window's open because fuck those people.
They can die mad about it. Sooner rather than later, I guess.
Fuck. He then goes on to say, that's where we are talking about a thing here. Me. Hey, me. that
Hey, me, cool it.
women should be fine giving birth by state force anyway, because if you give the child up for adoption, they'll find a suitable home.
Bullshit. Bullshit.
Vinny cites a statistic in a way that is not okay with me. Nobody should get hyped for this phrasing. He says that in 2002, quote, the domestic supply of infants relinquished at birth or within the first month of life and available to be adopted had become virtually non-existent, end quote, due to the number of people looking to adopt. And saying those words in that order makes me feel yucky. How do you not write that and then become the meme of David Mitchell saying, "Are we the baddies?"
I don't know, because it's pretty rough.
Yeah, and it's also stupid.
Domestic supply,
Yeah,
not the international supply.
No,
Domestic
their
supply.
importing is fine. We're low on domestic babies, so you're going to have to drink one imported from Ireland tonight.
Ugh.
They hand you a beer menu, but it's just age and nationality of babies.
Oh God.
And it's also not a reason to do this. Pregnancy comes with physical, hormonal, sometimes long-term physical and mental health changes. And according to the Annie E. Casey Foundation, nearly 16% of children had experienced physical abuse that were adopted. 9% were sexually abused, 6% were emotionally abused, and 2% experienced medical neglect, with young children being the most at risk. 72% of victims were 10 and under. And I assume that according to Justice Alito, that's fine.
I guess so. I mean, of course, he probably never looked into anything further. He just decided, oh, they're fine. And that's it.
Yeah, I can't imagine, well, it's a lie. It's a lie told by the right wing. They've told it for decades of well, adoption's always an issue.
There's a whole lot wrong with that. There's a I guess I'm just gonna cut in here now and on that claim that the child will be adopted, because obviously that ain't true. Or that they'll have a happy life. That's not always guaranteed, because plenty of people do it just for the prestige or money or whatever. The adoption process is neither easy nor quick. Like, there's multiple steps. You got to get approval from the agency the child is registered with or whatever. And according to the North American Council on Adoptable Children, that I've never heard of this before, but I mean, okay. Depending on the state, it can actually cost a lot of money to adopt a child. I think it's more money for babies, but And according to the New Jersey Adoptive Parent Handbook I think that's from Alito's home state, it can take up to 5 months for a person to get licensed as an adoptive parent, and then they can start the process of waiting, and then they can be hooked up with a child, and then they can do the whole getting to know you process and decide if they want to go through with everything. So it's not immediate, not even by any
And during that time, that kid's not getting any of the stability or security that children need for healthy development.
Nope.
That alone is going to be traumatizing, just the waiting process.
And that's assuming people I mean, I don't know what the statistics are for adoption of older children versus adoption of infants and smaller children. Because I kind of imagine and assume that smaller children tend to get adopted quicker, more often than older children.
Yeah, I assume it's kind of this is going to sound horrible, but you know what? It's probably how Alito thinks it. I assume that if you look at the ages, because I haven't, it's kind of like puppies or dogs, right? When you adopt a dog, there's campaigns and pushes to adopt old dogs basically like Old Dogs Need Love 2 campaigns.
Yeah.
Because people adopt puppies and these dogs just die in a kennel somewhere.
Yeah. When they run out of space, or like and the dog gets too old or whatever, but mostly that they run out of space and stuff, they will euthanize.
Yeah. And so I imagine I imagine it's a minority of parents that are willing to adopt an older child. And I doubt it's a minority, and I bet it's a minority of that minority that has the skills and social resources to be able to help that child with what they've gone through.
Yeah.
Because we have this, Annie Daddy Warbucks kind of idea about adoption socially. It seems, certainly Alito seems to, but that's not reality. Like, there's no part of this that doesn't make it a hard knock life for them.
Yeah. And then I obviously I don't know the numbers, but definitely quite a lot of kids, like, you can age out of the system. I want to say it's 18, but I'm not entirely sure.
I feel like it should be. And then all of this is just on top of the fact that he literally made the point, I assume on accident, like I'm being charitable and just assuming he's an idiot, that you should be fine with it because there's a 66% chance that your kid won't be abused and a 1 in 10 chance they won't be raped before they turn 10. Or only a 1 in 10 chance they will be. Which
If I'm giving them up for adoption, I don't understand why I would be thinking. I guess the idea is because you're still connected to it because you had it, and it's like, I want to make sure it has a great life, so I'm giving it up for adoption or something. But
I would think that for a lot of people, they like the right likes to paint this romantic portrait of adoption as a propaganda tactic. It's just a lie. Because if you knew the statistics, I think most people have the empathy to worry about whether or not they're subjecting a child to physical and sexual and mental and emotional abuse. Because to me, for me, it seems like the statistic, it would like the reason why the response is like, actually, it sucks a lot of the time and is horrible and traumatizing every time. And then on top of that, instances of abuse, like, you're giving the kid up for adoption. You're not giving it to a cockfighting ring. I don't think anybody, I think generally people have the empathy of like, if they are going to give a kid up for adoption, at the very least, not want there to be a much, much lower chance than 1 in 10 that child will be sexually assaulted.
yeah, true.
Like for me, it's just an empathy. I've never given a child up for adoption.
Yeah, I haven't either.
I've never been there, but I worry about them. I
consider how shitty the system is.
Yeah, exactly. Like, and I imagine it would be a lot more emotionally laborious to have contributed potential meat to the grinder.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I can see that. Yeah. And then I guess I was also coming from the perspective of there probably were people who didn't want to think as much about it, maybe because I guess in the case that many people are probably going to be facing now, will be forced birthing. So,
well, I mean, do you think about where your food comes from? Do you think about the conditions that the animals had to live? I know you're not a huge animal person, but I've seen you play with dogs and kittens, and you're very kind to animals. Do you ever think about how the animals that you eat are treated?
On occasion, sometimes, yeah.
Yeah, but like most people try not to. I think that if you think too hard about it, you'll end up being a vegetarian.
Nah. I can compartmentalize. I've had a whole life of compartmentalizing. So
That's what I mean is compartmentalizing is what I'm driving at. Right. Like I think the self-defense that they're trying to encourage against that is the compartmentalization. You know, I tend to look at it like a third of the children are abused as an estimate because it's hard to get numbers on. And that is too high.
Yeah.
But I can see how if you're put in a position where that's, you know, your best option, I can see how somebody would err on the 70% chance and just compartmentalize that way. You know, I think it's inherently immoral to eat meat. I think as a society, we've gone past the point of needing to kill things for food. Never mind the like resource waste and things like that. But I can see how people who raise and care for and like take really good care of the animals they eat, I can see how that helps them from a moral perspective feel like they're being better people for it.
Yeah.
It's kind of the same thing where I can see how people would think like, yeah, but probably not. And that's easier. And that lets them compartmentalize. And I think that's what Alito is trying to, and the whole fucking right wing that does this shit. I think that's what they're trying to spark is that impulse to compartmentalize that we've all practiced just from growing up in a capitalist society. Like none of us want to think about the slave babies that make our iPhones. None of us want to think that kids in adoption are being abused. We all want, I think it's safe to say, we want every child plus me to be adopted by a daddy Warbucks. Like, I would love a shaggy dog and a rich dad. Are you kidding me? But it's just not reality. But it's easier to compartmentalize that way. I think that's it for this week. This isn't a weekly show. So far, this is a once yearly show this year. So I don't know why the fuck I keep saying force of habit. I've been listening to a lot of podcasts. I would love to do weekly. If you go to patreon.com/apostates playground and donate as little as $1, then you can be part of me being able to hire a real editor and making it a weekly show because I'll have the time for that. But no, next time we'll talk about how it's going to get worse because it's going to get worse and it's not explicitly Christian, but what's the point of apostasy if you don't tackle it at the intersectionality?
Yep. I'm sure at some point it's gonna sort of like go around and be religious. What'd you say?
I was letting you talk.
Oh no, just it's gonna come back around to religion. It always does.
It is. Yeah, so the Patreon is patreon.com/apostates playground. The website is theapostatesplayground.com. Very shortly, starting with this episode, there will be a transcript section so that our non-hearing friends are able to enjoy the show, and I'll start working on the backlog as I have time in the executive function, honestly. The show may get
such a bitch.
It's such a bitch. The show may get more political from here on out and less like philosophical and historical novelty. Might get louder and screamier. So if you like hearing me do that, might be in luck.
I mean, you've done that before, you know?
I have.
That's not new.
It's not. It might get worse. I had to stop myself from. I had written a bunch of pages on how John Stuart Mill would think that the Supreme Court could fuck itself, and you know what? Maybe John Stuart Mill on abortion. We'll call it On Liberty on Abortion. On Liberty, John Stuart Mill wrote on. That might be an episode. I don't know, but I had to stop myself from screaming about it. Everybody wants to jerk off an Enlightenment thinker until you can take their arguments and twist them to be able to get abortion. Not even twist them that far, like curve them. Yeah, I don't know, man. So the Patreon is patreon.com/apostates playground. The website is theapostatesplayground.com. I love our non-hearing friends, and we'll start working on a backlog for transcripts. Transcripts will start with this episode. I am the letter X Essential Panda on Twitter. She is at Chic _shaman on Twitter. Maybe
I think you might just be one. I think you might just be one.
Again, always.
I check. I always check, and then I just like totally forget again. Like I don't know.
You know,
I can't explain that. What?
eventually, I'm gonna actually write out the intros and outros.
No, it's actually it's one word.
It is. I'm looking at it. S C
Yeah, I'm
S
looking at it
H
too.
EIKAHSHAMAN. Just to make it less confusing, it is separated by an underscore in the display name. But
Yeah,
the username, one word.
when you go at or whatever, it's
Yeah, because she'd like me to fuck myself. And the show is at apostasy motherfucker. I'm bad at my job, but I look at these statistics and nobody listens to this part.
oh, for real.
Yeah, kinda. At Apostasy Powered is the show. Drink some water. Take a stupid walk for your stupid mental health. Hug a loved one. If you don't have a loved one, hug a tree.
Go to the
Someone's
middle
dog.
of far away, whatever forest or whatever you are local to, and go out to the middle of it where you're alone by yourself and just scream. Just scream.
And if you get the opportunity into a Tupperware container and send it to just, tell them I sent you.
Damn.
That might be a crime.
Probably.
I feel like there's a good fair chance that's a crime. Whatever.